Thank you so much. Well, hello, everyone, and good evening. Thank you for taking the time to join us tonight for what I believe is a vital conversation. I'm Congressman Paul Tonko, and I'm indeed proud to
Recording in
represent the Capital
progress.
Region and New York's 20th District in Congress. My grandparents, immigrants from Poland, thank you so much, worked to earn their right to vote. That effort and their belief in our democracy instilled in me the importance of that right for each and every citizen. As we approach the midterm elections this fall, we are at a pivotal point for not only our country, but our democracy. Election workers are facing heightened and pervasive harassment. The Supreme Court greenlit the greatest rollback of minority voting rights since the Jim Crow era. The president has openly and repeatedly undermined and attacked the security of our elections, and by extension, our democracy. Over the past year and a half, I can say I have thought often of Benjamin Franklin's response to one observer at the Constitutional Convention of 1787, when asked whether the founders had created a republic or a monarchy. And Franklin replied, "A republic if you can keep it." Friends, I am determined, as you are, to keep it. That means calling out the illegal and anti-democratic actions of this president, educating our neighbors and friends of their rights as citizens and voters, supporting those who are ensuring that our elections run smoothly and efficiently, and speaking out against those who are spreading misinformation in all of its forms. Our democracy demands that we remain vigilant and united to protect it. Most crucially, we must remember that democracy is not a spectator sport. I am thrilled to be joined today by a group of experts who know that fact all too well and who are doing the vital work to protect and ensure Americans' fundamental right to vote. Before we formally get into the Q&A section, here's a quick introduction of these great panelists who join us tonight. Ashley Torres is the president of the New York State Elections Commissioners Association, a seasoned election administrator and Democratic Elections Commissioner in Ulster County, New York. The association represents bipartisan boards of elections across all 62 New York counties, advocating for professional, secure, and yes, transparent election administration. Bailey Hona is the chief of staff at Voters of Tomorrow, where she helps lead one of the nation's largest Gen Z-led civic engagement groups. Voters of Tomorrow is a youth-driven advocacy organization mobilizing millions of young voters through education, outreach, and issue-based campaigns. Lata Nath serves as director of voting rights policy at the Campaign Legal Center, where she shapes federal and state legal strategies to ensure accessible voting for all Americans. The nonpartisan CLC advances democracy through law, focusing on voting rights, campaign finance, and government ethics. And lastly, Erica Smitka, executive director of the League of Women Voters of New York State, leads statewide advocacy, voter empowerment, and civic education. The League is a grassroots nonpartisan organization dedicated to informed and active participation in government via policy education and public advocacy. Thank each and every one of you for being here this evening and for your work to protect and strengthen our democracy. Now we'll get to a question for each of our panelists and then go into hearing from the audience. First, I'll start with Ashley Torres. Now, Ashley, as president of the Election Commissioners Association, can you give us a broad overview of what a board of election does? And in that description, if you could include the access to voter data and how the elections commissioners play an important role and who has access to that type of information.
Yes, Congressman, thank you so much for hosting this, and to my fellow panelists. This is such an important topic. To answer your question, in New York State, a county board of elections is the local government agency responsible for administering elections and maintaining voter registration records. Every county in New York, every 62 counties, is under the framework of New York election law and under oversight from the New York State Board of Elections. Broadly, county boards are responsible for 5 major areas: voter registration. So we process registrations, addresses, and enrollment changes, and maintain an accurate voter record database. We administer the elections by preparing ballots, managing polling locations, recruiting and training poll workers, and operating early voting and election day voting. We administer vote by mail and ballot processing by administering absentee and vote early by mail programs and processing those ballots. We canvass and certify elections by counting ballots, conducting audits, and certifying results and handling recounts when necessary. We do candidate and public service by managing petition filings and responding to voters, doing outreach, and implementing election law changes. And in New York, our boards are run in a bipartisan fashion, led by 2 commissioners, one Democrat and one Republican, who oversee those election operations together. That bipartisan design is really special in New York. And as someone who's worked in this space for 16 years, I've seen the benefits of having a bipartisan structure. We work together. We're required to work together, which is one of the few spaces where you see both Democrats and Republicans working in good concert with one another. That extends to your second question, which is the request of voter access to data, voter data. So that brings us back to the bipartisan requirement. If a request is made, both commissioners have to agree to release data. FOIL requests are a very standard and routine part of our election administration in New York State. We have a very transparent system. Requesters are required to say that they're requesting the data for an election-related purpose. New York State protects voter privacy by requiring certain information be redacted before those records are released, and that includes the last 4 digits of a voter's social security number and their New York State DMV identification number. So no information is released until both commissioners agree. And if we're under a subpoena, then that requires judicial intervention, and our county attorney would also be a part of that process. So it's a very rounded out process that takes a lot of real evidence on the part of the requester to support why they're asking for that data. So in that way, New York State does uphold and support the data requests, and we take that very seriously.
Well, I'm hearing a lot of checks and balances, so thank you, Ashley. Let's go to Lotta next, as a member of that campaign legal center, with serving as the director of voting rights policy. Lotta, for someone who is just educating herself on this issue, can you lay out some of the major legal challenges currently taking place regarding our voting systems in the United States?
Absolutely. So I could take the rest of the panel laying them out, but instead I will just say that there's a few overarching questions, and I think a lot of the legal challenges that are currently taking place regarding our voting systems can be tied to those questions. First, there's a question of which citizens get to participate in the democratic process. We have seen a growing number of states enact laws that require voters to provide documentary proof of citizenship, such as a passport or a birth certificate when registering to vote. Similarly, a proposal like that was advanced on the federal level through the SAVE Act. And these requirements, they just naturally create barriers for eligible citizens who lack easy access to citizenship documents. More than 21 million Americans lack easy access to things like birth certificates or marriage licenses or naturalization papers, and 146 million don't have a passport. So we're seeing policies like that, and we are seeing legal challenges to those policies because oftentimes they violate federal law, or they discriminate, which is in violation of federal law in the way that they're implemented. Another question is how much authority the federal government has to oversee elections. You see a lot of that with the various DOJ lawsuits against numerous states seeking voter roll data. You see that with executive orders that set requirements for election administration that are typically and legally the domain of the states. And my co-panelist Ashley mentioned subpoenas. We have also seen that with federal investigations into election administration and subpoenas and warrants issued by the DOJ and other federal entities to seize ballots and election materials, as happened in Fulton County, Georgia. The last big legal question that I think we're seeing is about the Voting Rights Act and what remains of its protections against racial discrimination in voting and in elections. That was the crown jewel of the civil rights movement. The Supreme Court made a decision recently that essentially gutted that act in April. And within hours of the decision, we saw various states pass new congressional maps. So the question here is really what tools remain to fight racial discrimination in voting. And all of these questions, I think that the answers that will come up in federal and state courts, they're going to shape American election administration this year and beyond in future election cycles.
Absolutely. And, I get concerned because where we sit and from where we work, the gutting of some of the institutional memory at DOJ, for instance, weakens that system. And we need the experts now more than ever. So thank you. Erica, as Executive Director of League of Women Voters of New York State, we know that there are many people that are part of our election processes. Can you explain the roles that everyday citizens play in our elections every year and why that matters?
Certainly, I'd be happy to. Thank you for that question, Congressman. And I do have to do my due diligence. The League is a nonpartisan organization, so we're here today not to endorse any one candidate or party, but this. We were so happy to be invited because this topic is so critical, and the timing of this webinar is perfect because it's something that voters are thinking about every day before they head to the polls next Tuesday. I think there's something. Probably the most basic thing that folks can do is show up, show up to the polls on election day, whether you're showing up during early voting, whether you're showing up on primary day, which is June 23rd, I'll say it again, or in November. But also educate yourself about what's on your ballot, who you'd like to vote for. Do you have any ballot proposals? You can go to the League's, call it like our one-stop shop for everything you need to know before you head to the polls. It's vote411.org. And as you're doing that, get 5 other people in your life to do the same thing. Get 5 other folks to make a plan. It really is about getting out there. New York State actually has a pretty good voter registration rate. It's still very important for everyone to register. But when comparing our registration rate to our turnout rate is really pretty abysmally low. So the most important thing that an everyday citizen can do is show up and get the people in your life to also show up. If you are, interested in doing even more, the next best thing you can do is become a poll worker. New York State is always looking for poll workers. And if you are interested in our election process, you're interested in helping make democracy stronger, go to your local county board of elections and sign up to become a poll worker.
Well,
If you,
no,
go ahead.
No,
there's
I
all
want
kinds
to
of things
start.
you could do.
Keep going.
I'll give 2 more quick ones.
Okay.
Can also just dispel mis and disinformation. It is, as you noted at the top, one of I think going to be New York's really like a chronic issue during this election cycle. So your county board of elections, the New York State Board of Elections does a lot of good work putting out good information about our elections. So boost that to the people in your community. And you could also join the League for election protection work with our partners at Common Cause and the NAACP. And I'd be happy to talk more about that later. But
Great. Sounds so good. Inform voters and not suppressing any voter that has the right to vote in the upcoming election. So thank you. And Bailey, I think I skipped over you. I apologize. But as Chief of Staff to Voters of Tomorrow, we know that young people are getting most of their information from social media. Now, what are ways that younger voters can ensure that they access fair and true information about our election process on social media?
Yeah, thank you. And I'm actually going to hit on probably a lot of the things that Erica just mentioned, but something that we have found really, really effective in all of our work is we know that, especially within Gen Z and probably a lot of different communities, people trust their friends and their family the most. And while that can be dangerous in some sort of circumstances, it is something that we can really use to our advantage. I think of, when I'm going out and doing on the ground sort of GOTV as soon as we head up to an election, something that has been most effective is that relational organizing. And so I think if we're able to kind of plant those seeds of here's the accurate information of here's what's happening, whether it's from someone like your League of Women Voters in your state or Voters of Tomorrow has a voting hub nationally that we've tailored a little bit of the messaging to be more receptive to our generation. I think if we can kind of plant those seeds of, hey, here's where this accurate information is, and we can have people, share that to their friends, their family, or like repost it to their TikTok followers that are like within my generation, like 300 people that they know vaguely, but like, hey, I know this person. Let me look at what they're talking about. Um, and so, yeah, I think that's really important and also goes hand in hand with that. I think this is something we try to do a lot of at Voters of Tomorrow, and there's, I'm sure a lot of my other panelists have done as well. But when we do see mis and disinformation, calling it out and correcting the record, and doing that in a way that is receptive and not just like, hey, this guy's wrong, explaining exactly why, and taking away any of that fear that may have come from that mis and disinformation.
Awesome. Verification of whatever we see on any information feed, including social media, is so essential, so important. So thank you all for that first round. Let's go to our audience out there for questions that I'm certain they have. First question comes from Larry from Niskayuna. What do we do if this administration brings ICE or law enforcement or even the National Guard to interfere? And maybe we can start with you, Alana and Ashley.
I think what's important is that we do have an administration that is weaponizing agencies like this, but what's important is that there are still laws in place, that state laws and federal law that prevent intimidation at the polls, even by law enforcement officers. I think it's important for election officials, for voters, for poll workers, for everyone to sort of know their rights and be prepared to monitor situations and be prepared to go to court, honestly, because there there's a risk of interference at the polls, absolutely. But I think that if folks are vigilant, if they're aware of their rights, if there's plenty of nonpartisan election protection efforts that usually are monitoring the situation and engage in real-time strategic communications and strategic legal intervention. I think all of these things should bolster our confidence that even if these agencies are used in this manner to suppress the vote, that communities can push back and fight for their rights.
Awesome. I think it's important for people not to be fearful of going to vote. And so every effort will be made, I am certain. Let's move to a question from Schenectady, from Leslie. How can I, as a citizen, help? And so maybe we'll turn to Erica and Bailey for this one.
Sure. So it really, I guess, depends on your interest and what level you want to get engaged at. So I know that Bailey and I both mentioned a few different ways. So, probably the easiest is spreading the right information before people hear the wrong information. So I know Lata was talking about the SAVE Act and how you may have to, if the SAVE Act were to be passed, you'd have to provide ID when you're at the polls. I've heard that piece of misinformation from New Yorkers time and time again. So I should make it very clear that you do not have to bring ID when you go to vote in the state of New York. So getting the right information out there for folks, whether it's on social media or whether it's folks at your local farmers market, I really think is critical. The next step, I would say, become a poll worker, and you could always join your local League of Women Voters. But I'll turn it to Bailey.
Yeah,
Awesome.
just to add to that, Erica, I think you actually mentioned this before, but something that we have really found really effective with our work is like I mentioned this a little bit before, but that relational organizing. And we know that kind of with everyone, you mentioned that turnout number, and especially within our generation, it's really hard to feel just like you're done, you're given up. That's what I see in a lot of people my age is that democracy just feels, I don't want to say useless, but a lot of times that feeling can come up for a million different reasons, whether it's feeling like, hey, I voted last time and now this administration that either I did or didn't vote for is coming and attacking me or my family or anyone. But I think something that's really important is talking kind of on the smaller end of things you can do, talking to the people around you about, hey, here's why I vote, here's why it's still important, and restoring a little bit of that faith in democracy from that smaller level, like with them around the people that you trust and the people that trust you. It's going to feel a little bit more organic than someone, whether it's an organization like any of the like myself or any of the panelists on here, um, it's going to feel a little bit more like talking down to when if you're having a conversation with someone that you trust or someone that you've known for a while, it's going to be a lot more effective.
Thank you so much. We're now hearing from Delmar from Virginia, and she asks, what are some realistic ways to encourage people to vote in person despite concerns about safety at polling places? And I would just toss that out to anybody on the panel here.
I would say, just to chime in on that, that New York State has so many ways and easy ways for people to access their ballot. If they want to vote by mail, then they should plan so accordingly. With the delays to mail, we have a cutoff date. You have to have the application received by the Board of Elections 10 days before the election. So that golden day, that early voting day, is when we need to receive it so that we can facilitate that going back out to the voter so that they can get it and vote it and postmark it by election day. I would advise anyone who's voting by mail to bring their ballot into the post office and have the postal workers hand cancel it so that it bears that postmark, because we have a postmark by election day, a New York State requirement. Early voting is a great way to vote in person. It's very easy. We have early voting going on right now across the state. Through the first 3 days of early voting, over 81,000 people in New York State have already cast their ballot in this primary. That is a lot of people that are then not going to vote or have to go and vote on just the one election day. So utilizing that early voting, where in most of the counties, Ulster County, Albany County inclusive, you can go to any of those early voting sites. It's not required that you go to a specific site, which is a really nice flexibility for voters. If they work in a town and there's an early voting site there, swing by that early voting center. And early voting is great, and people should really take advantage of it. It's a really great program that we have.
Sure. Anyone else on that one? If not, I thank the audience for bringing forward so many great questions. Let's go to Colony next with Deborah. And Deborah asks, could you speak to the legality of the threat to have the USPS, the Postal Service, stop delivery of mail-in ballots, and what can be done about this? Because there has been a lot of talk about tinkering with this through a U.S. organization like the Postal Service. So, and very important for all of the mail-in efforts. So, again, I'll toss this out to the panel of four.
Well, first off, if the question is what can be done, there is an opportunity right now to submit comments to USPS. I think that they need to hear from as many organizations and individuals as possible that some of the proposed changes to say that would affect people's ability to vote by mail, that would essentially demand data from states in order to help deliver their ballots by mail. I think that there is an opportunity right now to comment on this and to talk about how this directly undermines people's democratic right to vote. And it's also just sort of unprecedented that USPS would be used in this way. In terms of the legality of it, the rule basically would violate USPS's own mandate, and it would violate the Constitution and federal law by compelling USPS to unlawfully usurp the role of states, which under our Constitution, states are in charge of administering elections, and the USPS is a federal agency. So that is sort of beyond its scope of authority. So I would say that it is on very shaky legal ground already, but also there is something that people can do about this right now, and that is, in fact, submitting comments, as many comments as possible about how, I don't even know how else to say it, how outrageous this would be.
And I would hope there were ways that Congress could insert itself in terms of not utilizing in a negative way the Postal Service. Any other comments on this one? If not, we're going to switch to a question from Maxine, who is in Rotterdam. and she is asking, how should Congress hold social media platforms accountable for spreading viral disinformation? And look, I just think that there's a lot of opportunity here for us to go through the responsibilities that social networks have in terms of making certain that the information is accurate, especially when it comes to voting rights and voting standards and regulations. And the content of so many situations, there is a responsibility they bear. And maybe Lata or anyone on the panel would want to respond to the social media question.
Congressman, if it's okay, I can step in from a state
Sure.
perspective. So I can just let y'all know that this is something that New York State is looking at pretty seriously as it relates to both election mis and disinformation and the impact that AI is having on our election systems and has the potential to have on our election systems. So there are a number of different proposed bills that actually, a few of which unfortunately did not make it through the legislature this year, but they would address exactly that. The kind of the tricky part is that it's got to walk the line between ensuring that folks are, still able to express their voice and have, those First Amendment rights. But, it really is something that New York State and in particular our election law chairs are looking into seriously. So
let me just tag on to that response, Erica, because you remind all of us that election responsibilities still rest with our states. And for us to kind of take that over as a federal government is not really what the pattern has been. The responsibility has always been state and local. So thank you for including that in your response. Anyone else on this one? If not, our next question comes from Stanley in Schenectady. What changes have been made to voting registration and voting in New York State for both primary, midterms, and presidential elections? And maybe Ashley, you want to take a stab at this, please?
Sure. So since 2019, we've had hundreds of election law changes, including early voting. And the one that I really like is how we canvass absentee ballots. We're no longer a state that counts their absentee ballots after election day, which is a newer thing to people to wrap their mind around. We count every single ballot, whether it's an early voting, an in-person election day ballot, or those absentee ballots. And I get this question a lot. Do you count the absentee ballots if the election is close? And the answer is yes, we count them all. And now we count them before election day. So on election night in New York State, we have a more comprehensive picture of the vote totals. We have about 90% of the vote is part of that election night turnout that you're seeing those unofficial results on your state and your county board of election websites, which I think is wonderful because it gives people a bit better picture of the true outcome of the contest. And we're not on pins and needles for the next few weeks after the election, waiting to see the outcome of those contests. And as someone who's lived in both of those worlds, the pre world and now the post world, when we used to count them after election day and we had close contests, there was a lot of litigation and a lot of treating absentee ballots differently than we did the in-person ballots. And that has largely gone away. And that's for the betterment of all of us, regardless of what party you're in. Having a better picture of how many votes are for this person or that person on that election night has been a total game changer for us. And I'm so happy that we're in that post absentee canvas world and we have a better snapshot on election night. That's a big change.
And of course, the 7-day extension, right, from election day, the postmarking of a mail-in ballot, that is still the guideline for New Yorkers.
Yep, that's the guideline. And the other thing too is with that introduction, we also have the cure process. So if somebody makes a mistake, and I think there was a year where maybe it might have been your parents or another congressman's parents where they signed one another's envelope. And that happens all the time. We get ballots back, the wife signs the husband's envelope, the husband signs the wife's envelope. We can now fix that by reaching out to the voter and giving them time to cure those mistakes. That was introduced with this canvas measure, and it really helps count truly cast and verified ballots. It allows the Board of Elections, people like me, to reach out to a voter and say, hey, you made this silly mistake, let's fix it, and so we can count your ballot.
Yeah, technicalities, but there's a way to work with it and keep it all, in working order. This one comes from Jim. Can I volunteer to work at a polling place in CD 21, which is the Adirondacks in North Country, if I live and am registered in our capital region here in CD 20? Anyone want to take a stab at it?
I'll answer this one too. This one's a pretty easy one. In order to be an election inspector or poll worker, you have to live in the county that you have to work in a poll site in the county that you reside in. So if you're registered in Ulster County, you have to work at a poll site in Ulster County. You have to be at least 17 years old. So if you're 17 and you're pre-registered to vote, you can work at our poll sites. And that is the requirements. You have to live in the county that you're going to work in.
So for clarification's sake, Saratoga County, as an example, is in CD 21 and CD 20. But if you live in CD 20 and are a resident of Schenectady County, you could work at a polling place in Saratoga County's CD 21 territory, right?
That's right.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Next question is from Bill in Bethlehem. What do you think is the biggest misconception about voting and our electoral process amongst young people? And how do we build trust in that population block? Bailey, perhaps you would want to take a shot at this?
Yeah. So, I think right off the bat, it's really easy, especially for other generations looking at us to be like, hey, they really don't care about this. And that's honestly not that far off. And obviously I'm sitting here with you all right now. That's obviously not all encompassing, but I think um, it's really not a lack of care. It's the fact that I think a lot of members of my generation have lost faith in these institutions. And I think I touched on this a little bit before, but in a lot of ways, that's not for no reason. My generation specifically, I grew up half an hour away from where Sandy Hook happened, and I was same age as those kids that day. And then, just constantly since then, I've seen all of these things. I was in eighth grade when January 6th happened, and I was watching that, and countless other things I could go on and on. But I think it's really important to recognize the fact that young voters and Gen Z specifically are not just giving up for no reason. There's a lack of faith in these institutions, and I think a main really good way to fix that is to show my generation and show everyone that there is good that can come out of this process. I think, in a lot of my work, I see countless examples of people being like, this sucks. Everything I see right now sucks. This country I can't deal with it. And that's honestly fair in a lot of circumstances. But I think being able to have concrete things to show to, whether it's bring back to your district or seeing coming from the executive branch or anything like that, to be like, hey, here's how this thing that you voted for reluctantly or didn't vote for, and maybe you will next time, here's how it made a positive impact on your life.
Right. Inserting trust into that whole effort, I think is so critical. And I think Benjamin Franklin is counting on us. So we want to keep that republic. The next question is probably open to all of you. What should I do if someone attempts to stop me from voting when I approach my polling place?
Call the Board of Elections. Please let us know. On election day, we have so many authority over our polling locations, over what is happening at our polling locations. If someone attempts to stop you on your way to the poll site, then they are interfering with the election process. And that is something that we will use all arms of the law that are afforded to us, law enforcement, the Attorney General's office, to ensure that our poll sites are protected. I know this question came up before in regards to ICE, but any unauthorized person who is not permitted to be in the poll site, and if they're interfering with elections, they will be swiftly dealt with. We go to great lengths on the county level to have relationships with our law enforcement, with the state police, with our emergency management department. We do exercises before the election to go through a variety of scenarios to make sure that those things do not happen. But if they do, we can address them swiftly and have a plan in place to stop it and let the public know what is going on.
Right. Don't let anyone take away your voting rights. They're protected, and good advice. There's someone to step in and secure those rights for you. The next question is probably one that I should answer because it asks if I support doing away with the Electoral College. I understand the humble beginnings of the Electoral College. There were struggles that small states thought they would be overwhelmed and not accurately recognized. But I think the usefulness of the Electoral College has been withered away. And I think it's important for us to look at these elections and allow for every vote cast to count in a meaningful way. And that is just like, I think, just going forward with the popular vote, which is so critically important. So many people just have a hard time wrapping their heads around the fact that someone can win nationwide and still not be declared a winner. So I think it's time for of usefulness has faded, and it's time for us to look at some additional reforms in that area. Another question here is, what are the thoughts on providing identification to vote? I can tell you in the SAVE Act that's been advanced by this administration, by the president, it's another form of suppression and voter suffocation. It targets some of the most vulnerable in our society, perhaps the poorest, perhaps some struggling, women as a category of population impacted. They changed their name upon becoming married, means that they have to go get identification. So many of these things would cost people to go forward and comply with what the SAVE Act would require. And, it's a precious, precious right to be able to vote. And you shouldn't have to charge people to rack up expenses, especially those who least can afford that price tag. And it takes away the ultimate every person has a right to vote guarantee. So I think that, we need to make certain we go forward with making certain no fraud is involved in these elections. I think we've seen in the last couple of elections a lot of work done to make them squeaky clean, a lot of checks and balances, and some of the other efforts, including what the SAVE Act would do to require handing over voter registration rolls to federal agencies, are upsetting concepts. It's all intimidation. It's all, suppression that comes onto certain populations in our culture, and I think it makes voting rights unfair from the perspective of many. The next question we have is coming here from Larry, and he writes, I am a poll worker. What do I do if ICE shows up at my polling station? Open to anyone there on the panel.
Say, I should probably hand this over to Ashley. I mean, if you're a poll worker, you should call your poll site, get your poll site coordinator, who will then reach out to your county BOE. I will also say, if you are just an everyday voter going in to vote, another level of kind of protection, kind of eyes on the ground, is that the League is a part of a nationwide election protection hotline. It's 1-866-OUR-VOTE, where you can call in any language and be connected with someone who can help either connect you with your local board of elections, but we're also linked in with the Attorney General's office and our members of law enforcement on the ground. So it's really just another set of eyes and ears who are there to help folks and ensure that they've got access to the ballot. But Ashley, I don't know if you want to add anything else there. Go to your poll site coordinator.
Erica, I'll make it very clear. The only people that are allowed in a poll site are voters, poll workers, and if they've given their credentials, poll watcher. That is it. Anyone else is unauthorized to be there, and you need to call the Board of Elections if they show up and try to start enforcing whatever rules they think that they're allowed to. There shouldn't be any reason for ICE to be in a poll site because only citizens are able to vote in our elections. So there is an unauthorized person requirement for us to enforce. If someone is there unauthorized, we are meant to deal with it and remove that person.
I as we're talking about all these issues tonight, I'm thinking, wow, ways to suppress, ways to frighten, ways to intimidate and deny. And, as members of this wonderful democracy, our republic, don't let them push you back and push you away. be forceful, go in and say, this is my right, I'm going to do it. We need that kind of effort made, because this is a test election year where people are needing to respond to a lot of the intimidation out there. And let's be strong and rise above it. I think that's absolutely important. I'm told this may be our last question, but we'll see. If I'm not yet registered to vote, how can I register? What is the deadline for me to register in order to vote in this coming November election?
I'll answer this one too. October
Both
24th.
They know it all.
So we have our last day to register for this election is October 24th. It's the first day of early voting. It's what we call in New York State Golden Day. So it is a really big day for all of us. It's the first day that you can vote in person, and it's the last day to register. So it's really easy to register at the DMV. You can register if you're going to go there. You can register to vote online. So visit the New York State Board of Elections website where you can register to vote. It's closed right now because we are in the middle of a primary election, and we just closed the books on the 13th of June. But as soon as this election is over, the first week of July, we'll be all wrapped up after July 7th, and that will open back up again. So it's very easy. And when people register is when they put their ID in. So we do require ID in New York State. It's when you register. And so we're not a state that doesn't care about those things. We just get it done before the voter shows up at the poll site, because in New York State, we make it easy for people who have the right to vote to do so.
And it's so important for people to have that information. We're out of time for questions, but I do want to go to our panelists and offer each of you the opportunity to share your thoughts that perhaps we didn't cover or that you want to emphasize. And then I'll close us out. But I do thank each and every one of you for being the experts you are, sharing your strengths here today and your solid information, and for encouraging us to go forward. So, Ashley, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Thank you, Congressman. And thank you for having me on here. It's been a pleasure. And from hearing all the other panelists who are also so great, and I've worked with some of them over the years, Erica, it's nice to see you on here. So what I'd like to say is we are not powerless. We are the people. At the end of the day, elections are not an abstract system. They're run by your neighbors, by people that you see every day at the grocery store, at church, at school, for pickup and drop off of your kids. The most important thing that you can do if you want to get involved is work as an election inspector. It is such a great way to get involved. You see everybody in your neighborhood, and you become then a trusted part of this system. It's funny, people, they point fingers at other states. Oh, they're not doing it that right there. They're not doing it right there. But everybody trusts their local election system. It's a common thing around the country. Oh, I don't like the way they do it in this state, but we do it good here. Well, everybody says that everywhere. So overall, it's a pretty good system. So get out there, get involved. And if you want to help, the best thing you can do is work as a poll worker. So thank you for having me. And if anybody ever wants to reach out, Ulster or otherwise, please do.
Thank you, Ashley. Bailey?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to start off by saying I am really grateful to be in this room. I think something that is really important to think of is including young people in all of these conversations, especially, I turned 18 last year. I registered to vote for the first time in Connecticut. I could pre-register when I was 17. And, I'm going around, running around, being like to all my friends, register to vote, because it's something that I care about so much. And I think it's really important. And I want to thank the congressman in his office and also everyone else on the panel for listening to young people and including them in these conversations. On top of that, also gonna add on to what Ashley said, and I'm sure this will be a common theme within all of us, is that not all hope is lost. We the representatives talked a little bit about states having authority over these elections, and that's kind of another barrier that can kind of make everything feel a little bit safer and a little bit more attainable. And I think, I just really want to emphasize that not all hope is lost. Vote, even if it feels like it's useless. I promise it's not. And just want to thank you all for having me on here, listening to me yap, and also including young people in these conversations, as well as emphasizing the importance of what we can actually do with this.
Okay, let's show record outcomes for all elements of the population. Thank you so much. Erica?
Thank you so much, Congressman, and thank you so much again for having me on the panel this evening. It really has been a pleasure and a pleasure to present with all of you. So thank you. I'll try not to be too repetitive here, but the one thing I really want to highlight is the importance of there is this narrative that Bailey spoke to about your vote maybe not mattering, not maybe that your vote doesn't matter, which we all know is false, but the one thing I want folks to really keep in mind is that when you turn out to the polls, not only are you voting for someone, are you casting your ballot to vote for a ballot proposition or the governor this year, but you're also showing your representatives and the folks in office and the folks that who will be in office that you're there and you're watching and you are participating in your democracy and that you care what happens in your community. And that, I mean, nothing could be more important that you've got folks out there, constituents who really are keeping an eye on our government and ensuring that they're truly being representative of the people that they serve. So I'll say, this will be the big kind of thing this year is really just going to be get out to vote. Really act as that trusted resource in your own community on these issues and encourage those 5 other people to go out and vote with you. But thank you so much for having me tonight.
Thank you, Erica. It has been great having all of you. And so thank you for your time and your messaging. And Lata, thank you. And closing thoughts you might have.
Sure. First of all, yes, thank you so much for having me. And it's just been an honor to be on this panel with so many experts. And I just like to say, I know we've spent like the past hour talking about threats to elections and threats of interference, but I think one thing to remember is that we do have partisan actors who are throwing things at the wall in an attempt to see what sticks. But just remember, when there are attempts to change election rules that are illegal, we as a society, like we can mobilize, we can reject unlawful and authoritarian behavior, we can hold people accountable. I know that members of Congress certainly can do that. And as voters, as concerned citizens, we are more powerful than we think we are.
Well, thank you, Lata, and thank you again to our entire panel. Look, voting, one person, one vote, the fundamental fairness of America. Voting is the cornerstone, the foundation of our democracy, our republic. And so we each bear that responsibility and we each have that opportunity. And we will not let anyone deny us of that opportunity. People are the power in this government. Every person brings that singular vote that they can cast and do it in an informed way and not be intimidated and be well informed. That people make our election process work means we're secure. And that's the strength of our democracy, that people have that opportunity to make certain that we follow the rules, the laws, and provide for an outcome that makes us a strong democracy, a strong republic, a fair republic, and an effective republic. And that will happen because we show the power and deliver the hope. And I will fight however I can with every bit of my being to never act powerless in Congress. New York 20 deserves that. And on behalf of New York 20, we thank our panel. We thank the audience out there this evening. And let's go forward and march for victory in November by showing all of us that we can vote, get to vote, and vote informed. So thank you, one and all.